Hey, what's up, guys? I am Luke Johnson, your New Orleans Saints beat writer for the New Orleans Times-Picayune. I'm here with Matthew Paris. This is a Saints Insider podcast. We are coming to you live from Southern California from our Airbnb. I think we got a little bit better setup this time, Matt.
Yeah,
Uh,
and no sunny Southern California. You normally throw that in, but you're
normally I do.
yes.
I went with a little bit of a different vibe this time, and we are going to be talking about vibes. I think the vibes are a lot better right now than they were in our first pod when it looked like we were sitting inside of a dorm room closet. Um, But, we've gotten a lot more look at the Saints team. Today they did their first padded practice out at Irvine. So we're going to kind of go through what we've seen in the first week, some players that are catching our eye, some things that are not so good around the Saints, and kind of our general thoughts on the team. So I just kind of want to start with that last topic there. After a week of training camp out here, we've been out here for all 5 practices. What do you kind of what's the feel around the team for you, like just from talking to the players, from seeing it with your own eyes?
Well, they've talked a lot about having a chip on their shoulder, and we talked about it on the last pod. But it really kind of is, I think, forming in a nice way. These are spirited practices. We saw our first kind of training camp scuffle today between Cedric Wilson and Alante Taylor. But even beyond that, like I think it's really starting to help them kind of form how they want to play as an offense. In particular, we've really seen them go with these heavy play action looks. A lot of time spent practicing running the ball, and I just think it's kind of starting to take shape of how Clint Kubiak wants to play, and yeah, it's really starting to come together that way.
A lot of motion too.
Yes.
And you and I were talking about, we were both looking through Aaron Schatz's football almanac. He does it every year. Lots of great detail. You look at the Saints and where they were last year under Pete Carmichael. I think 31st in use of play action, 32nd in use of pre-snap motion.
Right.
I think we're going to see those numbers both take a pretty dramatic tick up this year. I don't know if the Saints are going to be like a top 5 play action team, top 5 motion team, but it's going to be a lot more than we've seen in the past. The offense is going to look really different, and I think even the running game is going to look really different. They ran a lot of the outside zone count. You're going to hear that a lot in the next couple of weeks and during the season. Outside zone. It's not a new running play. It's not a new running concept. The Saints ran a lot of outside zone last year, but what we're looking at is a team that was maybe running 30 to 35% of outside zone, maybe now running 60, 55% outside zone. And they're going to base a lot of their offensive attack off of that. They're going to base a lot of their counter stuff off of that, including play actions and bootlegs. So it's like something we've seen a lot of.
And that's something that Trevor Penning was saying today when he met with reporters, is that they've really made it their bread and butter. And I think if you're looking for a reason for optimism, is this scheme may fit a lot of how the Saints offensive linemen are. I mean, Talise Fuaga, we can get to him, but he seems perfect for a scheme like this. He ran it at Oregon State. He even used the phrase bread and butter there. But they've really been able to get – thought it was funny. Dennis Allen was saying, when we asked him, what have you seen from the run game? He said, guys are getting to the second level now without contact. And that was just, you think back a year ago, like, I don't think Dennis Allen ever said that.
No. And you look at the Saints yards before contact numbers last year, they were not good, which is it's what you'd expect when you've got a whole stable full of running backs all averaging less than 4 yards a carry. So I think it's going to be better. Will it be really good? I think time will tell. And you've hit on this in the past. Often the first year in this new system takes some time.
It does. And I think even watching this, like it's not like they're ripping off 6-7 yard gains in practice. It's just, to me, it's just more evident, there was a hole there.
Right.
Like, they're still resulting in 4 yard gains, maybe 3 yard gains, but there just seems to be a little bit more of a lane for runners to hit. And I think, too, and you'll write about this later in the week, is they're presenting the run game in such a way that it just opens up so much more. Yes, they ran outside zone last year, but were they really playing that to that? Were they using that to their advantage by creating different types of looks, by going to a play action look off that? It's just seems a lot more creative this year.
Yeah, and going on to the play action thing, I mean, I led my my camp observations with it yesterday, and I'll be writing more about it later this week. But you can see it when you're out watching practice. And unfortunately, you guys, the fans, are not out there watching practice with us. But you can see the Saints run wide zone, wide zone, wide zone, over and over and over again, and then bang, quarterback will pull it out and bootleg away from the action of the play. And the Saints have done that over and over and over again. And maybe this is part of their install, and it's just going to be an element of their playbook. But the fact is that we're seeing a lot more of it this year than we have in the past. And I think when you look at the success the Saints had last year in their small sample size using play action, I think it gives you a little bit of reason for excitement for what this offense could be.
Yeah, it does. And, you don't necessarily need to run the ball. You don't need to be successful to run the ball to have a good play action game. But I think just the looks thing is maybe correlated if you can just trick the defense enough. And that's what's been interesting about watching their script in practice. They haven't really, it's first down, they run the ball, second down, they run the ball, and then the third is normally the passing play. I don't think it's going to be that predictable once the season begins, but I think it just allows them to kind of create a rhythm in the sense of practice.
I agree. And look, I think one of the things about that is this whole offense, and Dennis Allen talked about it today, is predicated on the Saints only having a few things that they do, and they do them really well, but they can dress that up in any number of different ways to make this offense look the same to a defense, but they're running 4 or 5 things off it. Mm-hmm. And when a defense is thinking run and it's going to be pass, or thinking pass and it's going to be run, and you got them a little bit flat-footed, or you got them thinking, that's where I think we've seen offenses like the San Francisco 49ers, like the Miami Dolphins, these Shanahan tree offenses really have a lot of success. So I'm excited to see what that looks like in a game setting. We won't get to see that, I think, until August 10th when they play the Arizona Cardinals in their preseason opener. But I'm looking forward to that.
I am, yeah, I am too. And I just think in terms of, you mentioned vibes earlier. Players are excited about this offense. Chris Olave has just, every time we've talked to him, has mentioned yards after the catch and what that can do for him. And he's also talked about how it feels like they just feature playmakers a little bit more, that this scheme is really trying to tailor that. And I think another interesting thing over this first week of camp is just kind of how they've spread the ball around and how that's kind of starting to crystallize a little bit of, all right, who are the actual playmakers on this team besides the ones we know about, or in addition to the ones we know about. Like, we know Rashid Shaheed is a player in this offense, but he's been featured a lot.
Yeah, he has been. I think maybe even featured a little bit more than Chris Olave at this point in team drills. Okay, switching over to the defensive side of the ball. Look, the offense has gotten a lot of attention this entire offseason and in training camp for good reason. This is a really new thing around here. But the defense, a lot of the attention has just been on the age of the defense, or at least the really, really important players in the defense. Cam Jordan, Demario Davis, Tyrann Mathieu. You wrote a story about this and kind of their approach to it. But I want to look at like a more holistic view of this defense here, and kind of what some of your takeaways have been for the unit as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that is maybe encouraging for them is that they've still been able to produce turnovers in practice at a relatively high rate. Now, this is more so against backups. Derek Carr has had an interception or two, but they've still at least seen, I think there's only been one day of practice so far that they haven't had a turnover at all. But they're still it's still the same Dennis Allen defense. They're going to play press man. They're going to try and be physical. Pete Werner, I thought, has had an incredible camp so far. He's just, and what's stood out about him necessarily is that he's been able to just kind of blow up screens, really sniff out plays closer to the line of scrimmage. And I actually think that's something I'm going to be monitoring as camp goes along is, all right, once the Saints start to air it out a little bit more, when they have more of these shotgun looks, is he still going to be effective? But, the Saints run a lot of kind of closed,
like tight formations,
and he seems very effective at sniffing those out.
Yeah, I think that's always been one of Pete Werner's strong suits is play recognition and diagnosing things. He's a really, really intelligent football player. But I think we haven't seen a lot of him as a playmaker at the NFL level. And I think throughout this training camp, he's been making plays. I think that's safe to say. You constantly hear linebackers coach Michael Hodges saying, "Attaboy, Pete," constantly. It's like 3 or 4 times a practice. So he's really showing out. I agree with you there. And I agree with you on the takeaways. Look, they were number 4 in the NFL in takeaways last year. But the reality is it's a really volatile statistic from year to year. It's really hard to be really, really good in takeaways one year and then really, really good in takeaways the next year and the next year and the next year. It's not necessarily something that is just easy to replicate. And we talked to Paulson Adebo about that today, and he said, well, you have to have the quarterback throw you the ball, and then you have to make a play on it. And sometimes it's a matter of the ball bouncing your way. A lot of luck involved. But I have been pretty encouraged by the defense. If they're not intercepting passes, if they're not catching the passes thrown their way, they're punching the ball out. We see it after every single play. The defense kind of rallying around the ball carrier, and everybody's just punching top down, trying to get the ball out. So, I think a lot of it is a mentality thing, and we'll see if it actually carries over. History data says probably not, but as long as they're not as bad as they were in takeaways 2 years ago, and they can get kind of somewhere closer to the middle, I think they'll still be a pretty good defense.
Well, and I think the way to counteract that too is, if you have regression with turnovers or on third down, the way to make up for that is your pass rush needs to be a lot better. And that's
I agree.
Something that I think that we've started to see Chase Young just a little bit. We saw him in 3 snaps today in team drills, but they seem pretty excited of those 3 snaps.
Yeah, my takeaway there, right, is if somebody only gets 3 snaps, 3 competitive snaps in team drills, and is somebody that everybody's talking about after practice, and not just because he's Chase Young and he's a offseason, a high-profile offseason acquisition, but because of the way he looked in those 3 snaps, I think that's a good sign. Long way to go. This is literally our first time seeing him. He's probably been chomping at the bit to get out there. He hasn't been going through the team stuff that everybody else does. He's got fresh legs, yada, yada, yada. Long way to go. But very impressive today in a very small sample size.
Yeah, and Dennis Allen mentioned his Chase Young's bull rush, and I think that's kind of an important thing in Washington. There was a very big conflict there of Chase Young trying, what pass rusher did he want to be? Did he want to be more of a speed guy? Did he want to be more of a power guy? And you're seeing today, at least, you saw more of Chase Young, the power rusher, and I think that plays to his strengths. And he's still a very strong dude. And what made Chase Young a rare prospect to begin with is that he had the combination of power and speed. But you saw both of those elements, honestly, even in those 3 snaps.
Yeah, and he certainly looks the part. Yeah, guys. Let's just say he's built.
It's
statuesque.
Someone asked me earlier of what people thought of him here, and everyone I've talked to is just like, oh my God, Chase Young's a lot bigger than I thought. And I'm kind of used to it now being around him, but yes, there is that adjustment of this is a very large human being.
Okay, real quick, let's do a little vibe check on special teams. The Saints have 4 specialists in camp, 2 kickers, 2 punters. The 2 incumbents, Blake Grupe and Lou Hedley, are competing against newcomers Charlie Smith and Matthew Highball.
Yeah, sure.
One of those 2. He's a left-footed Australian punter from the University of Vanderbilt. Let's just kind of it's hard to necessarily really get a grasp because we don't know exactly what they're asking them to do. Sometimes they might be asking them to kick short balls, hard to catch balls, like they did a lot with Lou Hedley last year. Sometimes they're asking them to flip the field. But I kind of want to, a week in, where are you at on that?
Yeah, I think the kicker competition is pretty clear cut right now. I think Blake Grupe has a solid lead there. There was a funny moment with Charlie Smith where Darren Rizzi was saying for Smith to put the ball in the hash, and he kind of hesitated. I'm like, oh, does this guy?
He's learning what a hash is.
He's learning what a hash is. understandably, I mean, this is this is his first time playing football, and I think Charlie Smith, the nice thing about him is he has that roster exemption, so. He definitely has a strong leg. I mean, he made a 59-yarder. That was maybe the best kick we've seen in camp, but he's just been too inconsistent to where I don't think this is an actual competition right now, is because we've seen him kick balls out of bounds on kickoffs. That can't happen at all. The leg is okay, but it's not there yet. And I think maybe in another year or 2 it could be for him, but I just think Blake Grupe has a really solid lead on that race. Punter, I'm interested in your thoughts. I think that one's much more up for grabs.
I agree. Yeah. I think. Look, I thought Lou Hedley had a really, really nice offseason program. I thought he came into OTAs looking like a much more consistent punter who's really able to get the ball downfield a lot better than he was last year. But I think that consistency's kind of waned a little bit as training camp has started. And Matthew Highball's, I mean, pretty consistently booming the ball down there, 50, 55 yards. Now, does he have the placement that Headley has? Is he doing exactly everything that they want him to do? I think that's a little bit tougher to say, but I think just from the eyeball test, a little bit more consistent with him. And I agree with you on Groupie too. Today he missed his first 2 field goals of camp, and both were from 56 yards. But I think he was 21 for 21 up until that point. So and then it's hard to say. Last year, if you would have asked me this time, I would have said there's no chance that either Will Lutz or Blake Gill can lose their jobs to these 2 undrafted rookies, and then both lost it. So there's a long way to go in camp still.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, I think we're seeing that with other positions too of, I wrote about the safeties today a little bit, and a guy that's really kind of surprised me of how much of the mix he has suddenly been in is Will Harris.
Yeah.
Jonathan Abram has gotten a lot of first team reps. I think if we're going to talk about surprises of camp, Jordan Howden has really he's gotten some first team reps, but he's not the coach. I don't know if the coaching staff feels as strongly about him as maybe the playing time for him last year indicated.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. Last year, I think was he was on the field out of necessity. But like if you talk to Dennis Allen, talk to the coaching staff, and a lot of times it's with the rookie, they're trying not to let them, they're trying not to get their head too big. But there was some critiques, after every game. So he's definitely he's in the mix. But I think I agree with you. He's probably like highest number 2 on the pecking order right now.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was telling last year that they closed the final 2 games. They went to Abram.
Yeah.
They could have stuck with Howden. He was healthy, I think. And they just didn't. They wanted to make a change there. And so if we're going to switch sides of the ball too, I think A.T. Perry's another guy like Howden where, he got an opportunity last year. Seemed like things are on the up and up, but he's had a quiet camp so far.
Yeah, he has. Every now and then he'll make a catch where you're just like, wow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Spectacular. But like consistency, I think, is the thing for both of those guys. And really, if you're talking about succeeding at the NFL level, it's not what you are your highs. It's what you are on an average every play. Okay, let's switch gears a little bit here. I'm interested to hear like if you had to pick like 3 standouts. And you could rank this however you want to do it, whether it's stars who are playing like stars, unheralded guys who are playing a lot better. Like who has really, really caught your eye? 3 of them.
Yeah. First one, let's start with the obvious. Mason Tipton.
Yeah, he's been awesome.
Undrafted from Yale. I mean, you and Jeff were in on him early, like in the spring. I was maybe a little skeptical. I'll take the L on that one. It's gotten to the point for me that I want to see him with the first team.
Yeah.
I just want to see how he does against superior competition, because there was this practice rep today of one-on-ones where he just like smoked Alontae Taylor, and he didn't smoke him by running by him or stuff. He just did a hard stop, had the great footwork, turned around and caught a pass. And he's thought of as a deep threat, but if you can show that versatility, it's been really impressive. Another guy I think has been taking advantage of his opportunities, Jordan Mims, running back, who has filled in for Kendre Miller. And the third one, I'm going to think here on the fly, but honestly, Talise Fuaga has looked really solid. Eric McCoy, saying that he was the best rookie offensive lineman he's ever been around since he's been here, kind of caught my ear. So I was watching closer today to see, like, all right, what does this kid have? And he just really has that athleticism and can, even when he's being pushed back physically, because there are some reps, where that just happens, he's still able to kind of hold his ground, and it doesn't really, he's getting pushed back, but he's not letting the pocket collapse. If that makes sense.
Yeah. And I think he's a really smart football player too. Saw him today. The Saints defense was sending like a corner blitz, and he passed off his guy inside and came back out to get the corner blitz. That's hard for a tackle to do, to get the edge on a corner,
right?
Who's coming off on a blitz after passing off a guy. So I'm with you on that. I think the guy I would add is Pete Werner, who we've already talked about. I think he's had just a really, really strong start to camp. And man, Mason Tipton, this guy has caught like probably 4 passes, 40 yards plus.
Yeah.
And the speed is definitely there. The confidence I feel like is growing every day, and the confidence the Saints have in him is growing
Right.
to where we're getting to see him in some of these. And I imagine there are going to be snaps soon where he's out there with the first team offense. Guy's absolutely making a case. Long way to go for an undrafted rookie, and he's got to clean up some mistakes. We've seen him drop a pass, or we've seen him drop a kickoff rather. He had a fumble the other day in practice, so he's got to clean some stuff up. But I think this is a very, very impressive start for the rookie. I'm with you on Jordan Mims. I think for this wide zone offense, the keys here are patience, vision, burst. I think he has all three of those things. Really looking forward to seeing him in like actual game action. And let's see, is there anybody else? I think Jake Hayner's been really solid. I think Spencer Rattler's made big strides since minicamp when he's throwing about a pick a day.
Yeah, I see the backup quarterback competition is really even right now, and I think that's a huge testament to Spencer Rattler and like strides he's been able to make over the last few weeks. He's just a lot more inconsistent. He's had a ball here or there where, all right, maybe you should have thrown that away, or why did you make that decision? But doesn't feel as reckless as it did in the spring. And I think specifically the biggest thing I've noticed is he's not nearly as late on throwing the ball as he was. Like that was the thing where I thought Hayner was clearly ahead, is because Rattler just seemed like he wasn't on time nearly at the rate he needed to be. But that has really cleaned up in these 6 weeks here.
Yeah, I totally agree. Okay, well, let's get on to maybe some things that you either need to see more of, or things that you think are a little bit disappointing at this stage.
I think the pass rush for me is still a question mark. Cam Jordan, not that I'm questioning him per se. It's just I haven't seen that. Like, I haven't seen him go, oh, that would have been a sack from Cam Jordan yet. And I just kind of interested to see how that plays out. I think Carl Granderson on the other side has been really strong. He's kind of had his fair share of reps where he's won, but just that overall push and the defensive tackle situation, just the way that it's been, it's just been Colin Saunders and Nathan Shepard with the ones. Brazie's been hurt now. It just hasn't really developed to where I don't know, like, is this going to be that much better of a pass rush? And I think it honestly depends on Chase Young getting healthy and whether Brazie can make that leap too.
Yeah, I again, I'm agreeing with you here. Look, I think the Brian Brazie injury I'm a little concerned about, because I didn't see it happen. I didn't see him walk off, and he's not been present the last couple of days, and he's a really important player for this defense. I mean, if you can get some interior pass rush, which he was really the only guy who was giving them that last year, it makes things a lot easier on the outside guys. So they need to get him healthy. We haven't heard anything as far as a timetable. I think Dennis Allen's probably learned his lesson on that with offering timetables that didn't end up panning out, because these things are it's kind of up in the air all the time anyways. For me, I think this is kind of a decent segue. I'm a little worried about some of the health stuff that has been popping up for them. At this point, we've already got two starting or players who are going to play big roles, and we know are going to play big roles in this team sitting out practice, and that's Brazie and Marshawn Lattimore. Marshawn Lattimore one is particularly concerning for me, even though Dennis Allen said he's not losing any sleep over it, just because of what we've seen the last couple of years from just having trouble staying on the field. And then Kendre Miller, going out in the first 5 minutes of the first training camp practice with a hamstring injury. He's a guy that we talked a lot about this summer. As somebody who could really make an impact on this team as a rusher, as an explosive play guy. And I think a lot of us were really looking forward to seeing what he could do. And it just hasn't materialized because he can't stay on the field, which is really disappointing.
Yeah, and for Lattimore too, there's no, Dennis Allen described it as a little bit of a hip flexor, but hip flexors aren't a little bit of an injury like that. No. That takes some time. That can be nagging. It's tough to come back from. And a hamstring too. I mean, that's the one that I like. If I could give truth serum to Dennis Allen, is I want to know the severity of that one, because it just seems like there's such a wide range of hamstring injuries. Now, we've seen him be on the sideline. We've seen him before practice with the hoodie on. I think he was doing some rehab work so it seems like he's at least trying to get back. So that's encouraging, but it's just not I don't know. I mean, they're counting on these players, and I don't know if you like. It doesn't necessarily make me think, oh, Marshawn Lattimore is definitely going to be here next year, because it's the questions we had about him still remain because of how things have unfolded so far.
Yeah. And I think to add to this, I think one of the things it's a little bit of I don't know if it's a concern, but kind of hoping to see or wondering if some of these young offensive linemen are really going to seize their jobs.
Right.
We've seen Trevor Penning handle the lion's share, not all, but I would say like 90% of the starting reps at right tackle. But Nick Saldiveri kind of maybe losing his grip on it a little bit. He's been splitting reps at first team left guard with Lucas Patrick, the veteran they signed, who was with the Chicago Bears last year, I believe.
Yeah.
It started with just Saldiveri, and then it started going Saldiveri, then Patrick, and now it's going Patrick, then Saldiveri. And then today, Saldiveri walked out with a calf injury. So, if you were kind of hoping to see, 3 young players on rookie contracts on the starting line, it's kind of starting to feel a little bit shaky there.
Yeah.
Outside of that, I mean, it's really tough to be, I guess, discouraged with anything we've seen so far, just because it's still very, very early in camp. And I think a lot of the things that we're looking for, we've seen. We've seen a lot of the good stuff from the offense with moving players around and getting players the ball. I think Derek Carr has been very sharp throughout practice. I think we've seen some of the new players, such as Kool-Aid McKinstry, be really impressive. Chase Young in his really first action today was impressive, and I think the fact that he was even out there for the first day of practice is good news. So a lot of stuff to be encouraged by, but we're not going to try to pump a bunch of sunshine at you guys. It's not what we're here for.
Yeah, no, it still definitely remains to be like, even the coaches themselves have talked about, like, we need to see the pads, we need to see if these guys are for real, basically, and the preseason games are going to go a long way toward that too.
Okay, let's do a vibe check on like some of these interviews.
Okay.
And that's our bread and butter. That's our wide zone. Okay, so like you've asked a lot of questions about
that's rambling.
You've asked a lot of questions about kind of expectations and outside perception of this team, and whether the guys care about it. And I think we've gotten some pretty revealing answers, at least to where their psyche is, where their mindset is, and what they feel about the outside perception. I think Cam Jordan had some really great answers about that. I think Demario Davis had some really great answers about that, and then he offered this really kind of impassioned support for Dennis Allen and Derek Carr with the not so subtle understanding that these guys are kind of under fire on social media. So when you're kind of hearing some of these guys talk about the season and kind of their hopes for it, what's kind of stuck out to you about that?
Yeah, just how prideful they are. I mean, we don't even have to mention the interviews. Like, as we're recording this, Tyrann Mathieu in like a Twitter war with CJ Gardner-Johnson because of Madden ratings. It's like, and Matthew's not normally a guy who feels like he needs to respond to that sort of thing, but he's a prideful dude.
He's done a lot of that in the past, but like not necessarily.
He's, I would say more high. I wouldn't say Mathieu went low, but I just think he's like, here are my PFF stats. Check the numbers. It's just like an advanced stat off at this point, and hey, credit to them. Literally an EPA. Like, check my EPA, bro. Like, oh, all right, like, great. I'm for that. I'm nerdy about all that sort of stuff, but I mean, it's just, I think there's two ways of it. It's one of how proud they are, and then a guy like Trevor Penning, there's that confidence there that you want to see, and training camp is the time for confidence, sunshine, rainbows, but like, you at least need to see some of that before things go off the rail, and I think that's at least there. Like, the fan base reaction, I think, is a lot more negative. Like, I had a video today of Derek Carr missing a pass to Rashid Shaheed, and the response,
and Derek Carr after the pass is like, "Hey man, it's my fault."
Yes,
throw. And it was, to be fair and clear, it was a difficult throw.
Yes, yeah, like, it was really good
through the air
coverage from Kool-Aid McKinstry. But you would, based on that reaction, that treats the Saints like they're a 3-14 team, and that's just not. That's not the vibe around here. That's not, I don't think, realistic. It's just like there is a disconnect there between the Saints and their fans right now, and I think that's been really reflected throughout these interviews.
Yeah, I agree. And it's going to be really fascinating to watch how the season unfolds because of that reason, especially early in the season. If they make some waves, a difficult stretch early in the season, they'll get their opportunity to be like, "Told you so."
Right.
And if they are, the team we've seen the last couple of years, and they go up against some really difficult competition and they don't succeed, a lot of people can say, "I told you so," and they'll have to kind of eat crow. But that's why you play the game. You play to win the game, somebody once said.
Right.
Okay. Well, let's, before we wrap things up here, next week of camp, I think they got a couple off days sprinkled in there, but what are you kind of hoping to see, and what are you kind of hoping to see develop over the next couple days?
Yeah, I mean, the fact that Chase Young practiced today, I know we've talked about it, but I just really want to see his ramp up and see whether that explosion's back, because he looked good. I just don't know. Yeah, it's not all the way there yet, I think, personally. And so we'll see whether he's continues to be explosive and how that makes a difference. And then I want to see if some of these competitions take fold a little bit. Like, I think there's a clear cut competition going on at left guard, safety. I don't think kicker. Oh, backup quarterback, but like kicker is not really a competition right now. Linebacker, like, credit to Pete Werner. Like, I think Willie Gay's had a solid camp, but just the way that Pete Werner has performed hasn't really made it a competition. And so I just want to see if things kind of start to change over the next week. Can these players who have the lead maybe be as consistent as they've been the first week, and whether anything changes there?
So I'm personally really interested in watching Trevor Penning very closely, because it's hard to watch offensive line strictly in practice.
Right.
But we're all out there watching everything, and a lot of times your attention goes to the ball, and for our purposes, it kind of has to, because of what's going on with Clint Kubiak and Derek Carr, the skill position players,
and charting notes,
charting notes. Who completed 9 out of 11 today?
Yeah.
Look, all that stuff is important, but I think every now and then Penning catches your eye, good and bad. So I want to pay some really close attention to see just how far he's come, if he's developed at all, to see that confidence there, to see other players kind of pumping him up, because we know that's happening too. Mm-hmm. He's a really important player for them, both this year and in the future. If he doesn't get this year right, he acknowledged it today. If he doesn't get this year right, it's
the thing that stood out to me about Penning too is just how many people have gone up to him for advice, or like tried to impart some advice. He mentioned Teron Armstead, the guy who's here and knows what it's like to be kind of that franchise tackle that people expect you to be, and just went over with him in the offseason after OTAs and tried to really dive deep there. So it seemed like it was really helpful for him. But at one point, I can imagine it being maybe slightly overwhelming, of like so many people coming up to you and be like, "Hey man, keep your head up." Like, yeah, I know. Yeah. But credit to Trevor Penning. I think he's taken it in stride, and we'll see if he's, actually turned a corner with this technique.
Yeah. And kind of related to that, now they've put pads on. Today was their first padded practice. I want to get a really good sense of where this run game is, or a better sense than we have gotten when they were out there in shells or in t-shirt and shorts. I think that is going to be so crucial to this offense this year. Just considering who Dennis Allen is as a coach, the kind of stuff they want to build around the run game, it's going to be really important for them to actually get this thing right. And for this group of offensive linemen they've assembled, a lot of inexperience, some guys who've kind of played below their expectations, but a lot of really big, really athletic guys. And that's what this kind of offense is. That's what they want. So I want to see if that really takes kind of a corner in the next couple of days. And then obviously we're going to be continuing to monitor basically everything else that's going on with the team. We'll see if they continue to get healthier, see if things get worse on the health front. We'll be there for all of it. So please stay tuned with us over at NOLA.com. We have so much stuff coming for you. We have 4 people out here, photographer and 3 writers. doing everything we can to stay on top of every little thing that's out here. Check us out on NOLA.com if you want to read more about Mason Tipton, the standout wide receiver from Yale. We have a big story coming out on him tomorrow morning, and a lot more coming. So stick with us. This is the Saints Insider Podcast. For Matthew Paris, I am Luke Johnson, and we will catch you all later.